Everybody, great to see you all. So many faces I haven't seen in a while, probably a good, I don't know, 6, 7 months or something like that. So it is very nice to look at everybody right now. I miss you all and the DRC, but I'm glad to be here today. And also glad to be here at Sally's last brown bag that she's coordinating. And I'm hoping that my connection's going to cooperate with me. I think it's going to maybe be a little bit behind. So I'm going to judge, things on my own pace instead of the reactions I'm looking at on camera, because that never helps me there. But anyway, as everybody knows, I moved out to D.C. last year. And I've been working with multi-door dispute resolution now for just over a year, actually a year and a half now, I guess it is. What I do is manage the landlord and tenant mediations in the civil division. We have 2 divisions at multi-door. We have the family and the civil division. I don't know too much about what goes on in family. We're pretty siloed off in our 2 areas, handling different types of cases and working with the mediator as well. But I have about maybe 10 to 15 consistent remote mediators that I get to use, and we are working together to fight through some cases. At the beginning of the COVID pandemic, we had a big shutdown for about 4 months, where we weren't handling any cases at all. And once we picked up our remote program, we were swamped with cases. I was busy with about maybe 4 or 5 cases a day, Monday through Friday. And we run remote mediations in the morning and in the afternoon. We have 9 a.m. Or morning mediations, and then we have 1:30 p.m. mediations as well. And pretty much what I'm doing is just what I was doing at the DRC, working with parties, getting them prepared for mediation, and then setting them up with their mediators. In the remote world, it's become a little more difficult to track people down. We don't always have the correct contact information on file. I'm not the one reaching out to parties first. They, input their information at the start of their case. So if there's incomplete information, it makes my life a little bit more difficult. But, we work with what we have and hope that the case can get going. And part of that also entails our remote agreement to mediate, which has caused lots of headaches for everybody involved. Adobe Sign is what we use, and it's not always the most friendly software for people, apparently. But, we're working with what we have. And as of recent, I started helping out with some small claims coordination as well. That's been going all right. I'm going to be coming off of that stint here soon, so my life is going to get a little easier here. I'm sure that Michigan has a similar thing going on with the eviction moratorium. Nobody here in DC has been evicted, or at least they're not allowed to be evicted for some time, and that's still going on. I believe that there's a court battle going on currently to try to get that taken away so that landlords can start collecting rent again. And once that happens, the floodgates are going to open and we are going to be swamped with cases again. Right now, there's a little bit of a lull as new filings are kind of trickling in. So that, I would say, is kind of broad strokes what I've been doing for the past couple months in the remote environment on Zoom. And I guess I could take a couple questions, or if we want to wait till the end, I can do that too. Really, either way works for me. And I'll wait a second until I catch back up with what's actually going on.
So we talked earlier about questions, and we thought it would be great if you would put them in the chat.
Great, then I will take a look there, and if I see some pop up, I'll answer them. Okay, so we've got Craig is asking how many mediators that do I work with. I would say back in the pre-pandemic world, I had about 20 mediators. that I was working with, and we've cut that down to about 10 or so. Not everyone is comfortable mediating on Zoom for various reasons, whether that's, not being comfortable with the technology, or also just kind of really just the general space of mediation as well. Some of our mediators tapped out feeling that this really wasn't going to be an appropriate process to handle these types of cases, landlord-tenant cases. But once we get back to in-person, which is on the horizon, hopefully, we'll get some of those folks back, and I'll be able to expand my roster once again. And then we also have from Ruth, she's saying, are the folks who do the mediations also volunteers? Over here at Multi-Door, they are volunteers. However, they do receive stipends for their work as well. We've got being under the court, so we're obviously looped in with their budget, and that gives us the a little more money to be able to hand out to the mediators that we use. All right, looking at another one here, I see from Carol and Christopher, do K-Prams provide training in circles for your group? I don't believe that K-Prams is coming to us. I wish that she would. I know that there's several of my mediators that do some circle work with kind of at-risk youth over in the various areas around DC. And I am looking to talk with them some more and figure out how I can get back involved with the circle work and restorative work and stuff like that. I really miss that that part of the DRC, and we're so court focused here that it's hard to kind of get away from that. But I'd like to get back into the circle stuff soon, hopefully. Let's see, we got another question from Craig here. Given the workload, I'm guessing it's all individual mediators versus co-mediation, correct? Yes, that is correct. So our mediators are solo mediators. The only time they've got someone else in the room with them is if they're getting reviewed, which it seems to happen fairly frequently, I guess. I thought we had just finished these up, but I had a whole new round of peer reviewers come through recently. So for the most part, single mediators. If there is going to be a co-mediation, I think it's got to be a pretty special case for our mediators to handle. All right, we got some more coming in here. I got another question from Ruth. Is your mediation structure similar to the DRC's? It is. We are a facilitated mediation center, same way the DRC was. People often still confuse that. They want us to be, more directive and tell them, hey, this is how things are going, but our mediators are trained not to do that. We feel the need to, but for the most part, our structure is very similar to the DRC. And we got another question from Carolyn here again. Do you have brown bag events? So we don't have brown bag specific events. However, we do offer some trainings and things like that, and just some continuing education opportunities to our mediators. And I want to say to others as well, I don't know that we necessarily limit who's allowed to participate in our events. We have a specific training manager that takes care of all of that. And his name is Emmett Ward. He just came to us from somewhere in Maryland, I believe, several months ago, maybe 7-8 months ago. And he is the one that's responsible for reaching out to people in the mediation and ADR community to host our different events and help our mediators learn extra skills and extra things like that. All right, another one from Phyllis. We have, how large is your staff? So up in my side of the office, the civil side, we have 4 case managers, including myself. So we have 3 case managers for all of the civil actions cases, which are just, I guess we have technically 5 case managers. We have the 3 civil actions case managers. We have myself, the landlord and tenant case manager, and then we have the small claims case manager who also doubles as the program officer. So then there's one person above me, there's one person above the civil case managers, and then up there we have just one more branch manager, branch chief. So I think all in all, civil branch, we're looking at about 10 folks. And then we have the upper management people, the director, executive director, and some people that work in her office. So that's another, I think, 5. And then down in family, there's about 15 or so there. So I think we have maybe 30, 40 people that work over in Multidor. And Ruth here asking, are there other organizations who do mediations for the DC courts? I believe we've got community centers nearby, similar to the DRC, that may help with some stuff, but if it's court ordered, it's coming straight to us. We are the in-house mediation people. And if they want to have another mediation outside of us, they would have to contact one of those other organizations, and it most likely would not be a court case at that point. It would just still be kind of a community-based case. All right, we've got a question from Diane. Great to see everyone, but oh, never mind. She said she's headed out. Just kidding, not a question.
So thank you so much.
Great to see her too. And I think that looks like no problem.
Okay. All right, thank you so much, Miles. It was great to hear about your work and see you again. So Carolyn, you said you would introduce Tracee?
Yeah, so I worked with Tracee. She is with the Community Mediation Maryland group, which is an organization in Maryland that helps coordinate training and a lot of other things. Tracee, I'll let you talk a little bit more exactly about what you do. But I knew her from working with the Conflict Resolution Center of Montgomery County, where we got a lot of support from her organization there. So Tracee, I'll let you go ahead.
Thank you, Carolyn. We had there was a Carolyn and a Caroline in the mediation world in Maryland, and I often made the mistake of mixing up the two. But Carolyn, it is so great to see you again. Thank you for the introduction, and thank you all for having me here today. Can everyone hear me okay, first of all? Okay, all right. So I work with Community Mediation Maryland, which provides technical support for all the 15 community mediation centers in Maryland. And that includes training volunteers, supporting centers in developing statewide partnerships, including with state's attorney's offices, it's not correction systems here, it's public safety, with the school systems and with courts. We also we also help centers establish best practices. So helping centers establish their board of directors, protocols for mediation coordination, hiring staff. And I worked really hard to carve out the best job in the organization, which is I work as the quality development director. And I love the job. So talking about feedback is a huge part of my job. So supporting people in having productive, open, honest, and direct conversations, honest, direct, and respectful conversations about where their mediation practice is. And it's a job I kind of accidentally stumbled onto. I had been a mediator and a trainer for a few years, and we developed a very intensive process for mediators to get feedback and also to get feedback and evaluation, and also to be certified in our model of mediation. We train folks on the inclusive mediation model. And we developed a process we call performance-based evaluation. We say PBE for short. And in the beginning, we had, there are 6 levels people can score on when going through PBE. It's a full day process where folks do a role play where they mediate solo and get evaluated with one evaluator, and then they do a co-mediation, and they get evaluation by the co-mediator, and the 2 evaluators derive the score together. And the person that observed the evaluator that observed the solo gives you back your feedback. And so we rolled out this process. We spent, I guess about a good 2 years developing the process with a lot of help from my colleague, Dr. Caroline Harmondero. She just completed her doctorate. And it was hard. It was very hard. And the thing that I learned from that process was everybody in the room learned. So from the feedback process. So whether you were the mediator, the participant, the evaluator, the logistician, everybody in the room was learning. And, there was a lot of concerns about scores and getting certified, but I learned like the feedback was the important thing, more so than the score, more so than the number or the level. Levels 4 through 6 were certification. And, in the beginning, there weren't a whole lot of people getting certified. And one mediator who was also a center director said, look, I don't want to spend this whole day and all these resources going through this process and not get certified. I want to do a role play and I want y'all to give me some feedback, y'all being the evaluation team. And this particular mediator was known for being snarky, And does everybody know this trick? Everybody know this trick? If you do this, you don't have to do whatever the thing is. If you don't know, you're like me, and I didn't know, and everybody was doing this but me, and so I was the one that had to give the feedback to the snarky mediator. And so I did. We spent about an hour talking. He did a role play just for him, and we evaluated. We, everybody gave me their feedback. I was the one that gave him his feedback. Now, let me say, for a little bit of background information on me, I am originally from Columbus, Georgia. Everybody know Columbus? We know Columbus? Nobody knows Columbus. You know Fort Benning? Maybe a little bit? Okay, that's where I'm from. And, so I'm from the deep South, and, tact is our mode of operandus. And how we define tact is it's the ability to tell somebody to go to hell and have them happy to be on their way, So I was able to give this mediator the feedback. He was very excited about the feedback. I hadn't really thought much about it afterwards, but he was very excited about the feedback. And actually, he brought his score up 2 levels just by implementing the feedback, So like originally in the practice, he scored at around a level 3. Without any more practice that I know of, he just implemented the feedback that we gave him and brought his score up to a level 5. So, beyond certification at a level that we would call, someone who could be a role play coach or a mentor for mediators. And I didn't realize at the time that I had just birthed my new career as a full-time mediation mentor. And so I've been doing this mentoring full-time since 2012. And to love it just really doesn't capture it. And something interesting that's been happening since I've started doing it. When I first trained to be a mediator in 2003, they told us get there at least 30 minutes early so you can prep with your co-mediator. The mediations usually last about 2 hours, and leave 30 minutes for prep with your co-mediator afterwards. We do a co-mediation model. I see questions coming in. I am paying attention. No scopes. Everyone that I co-mediated with followed those rules like it was, burned on our hearts, at Mount Sinai. Like it was like we followed those rules strongly. And then after I became, started working full time in the community mediation world, and I, was training a lot of the mediators that were mediating in the state and community mediation. I started hearing reports from mediators that folks weren't, that they were surprised after their training that many of their co-mediators were not abiding by the feedback process, that they were kind of ditching it or what have you. And I don't know if this is true. I don't know if this is true. One theory that somebody proposed to me, blame social media, and I'm all about blaming social media. It's one of my favorite things to do is to blame social media for something I don't like. And this mediator said that as a result of social media, people have gotten, the process of constantly putting your best face forward, at the expense of maybe the truth. Folks have gotten sensitive about feedback that isn't automatically positive, and that might be some of the reason why people aren't engaging in feedback as much. So I make it a point to deputize everyone that I trained, in these days, to bring back feedback, to spend time, committing ourselves to growing and developing as mediators, because the people that come to the mediation table, it is hard work to get to the mediation table. As much training as we do, as much as we invest in our skills and our, development as mediators, it's still the participants who are doing the heavy lifting. And I tell mediators who don't believe me, if you don't believe me, sit for 2 hours in front of somebody that you are in active conflict with. and see if it's not difficult, And so I feel like we owe it to them to invest at least 30 minutes with our co-mediators in growing and developing as mediators. And I don't think feedback has to be painful. It doesn't have to be a dressing down of a mediator. But and in fact, I believe that feedback actually begins prior to the mediation. So one of the things that I'm doing prior to the mediation is conversing with my co-mediator about my areas of growth, places that I know that I need to develop as a mediator, and asking them to, observe those things and make sure they give me feedback on them. So, like, particularly now since we're on Zoom, I'm notoriously bad about not looking into the camera when I talk to people. I look at my image and not at the camera, or I look at other people's image and not at the camera. And so I ask for feedback about how am I coming across? How's my neutrality look on Zoom? Another piece of feedback I'm regularly looking for. I grew up in a household where, with parents who applauded big words coming out of little kids' mouths. And so the words that I often use in mediation are not always accessible. And so I'm constantly working to make sure that my reflections as a mediator are more and more accessible. So I ask people to, check me if I use a 50-cent word when a dime piece was more relevant. And so so I start off the conversation with an eye on feedback. And I'm asking my co-mediator, what are the things that they're, the areas of growth they want me to pay attention to, and how can we support each other? And I think that if we do feedback consistently, like after every session, it takes the bitterness out of it, because it's something that we always do. It's not something we do when there's a real problem, right? So it's not the a lot of times when people hear feedback means, oh, I messed up, right? But for us, what we want to change, the connotation around it is feedback means I'm committed to my growth and development as a mediator. I'm committed to making sure that I'm delivering a high quality service to participants, and that my capacity to do that is consistently growing. And in using the co-mediation model, a lot of times people can get kind of competitive in their collaboration with each other, thinking we've got to do 50-50, right? And this is one of those times I am a closeted Dr. Phil watcher. Please don't tell anyone. But one thing he says about relationships that I really appreciate, and I think it's really apropos for us as when we co-mediate, is it's not about 50-50. It is we are each doing our 100%. So after 18 years of mediating and 15 years of training, my 100% should do a little bit more than somebody who's just coming out of basic mediation training, right? But I still expect them to do their 100%. The other piece I want to say, and then I'm going to make sure, please feel, I'm keeping an eye out for questions, and I'll get to the questions, is that I want us not to put more value on one than the other in terms of pluses and deltas. So there have been times, this is one of my favorite stories about pluses. I was bringing some friends home from college to my home in Columbus, and I had just gone on and on about my mother's quiche. Whenever we had guests, my mother would always make quiche, and I told them all about my mom's quiche and how great it was going to be. And we get there, and my mother's promise is like, "Go ahead and put your stuff down, and we're going to go out to eat." And they all looking at me like, "What?" And I was like, "Mom, where's the quiche? Like, you always have quiche when we have company." She's like, "I didn't know you like it. I didn't know you liked it." And it was the first time I realized I've bragged to everybody about my mother's quiche, and I never once told her I liked it, right? And that day I liked it, that I loved it, right? And so she didn't know she didn't know how good it was. She didn't know how much I was looking forward to it. And I think similarly for mediators, I had a colleague, and I had told her, I'd actually given her this feedback, but she didn't know how important it was to me. It was one of my first times mediating with her. It was my first year mediating. This was my colleague, Erica Bridgeford. And we had a participant. It was a elderly mother and her daughter, her middle-aged daughter. And, they had conflict, and the daughter was just sobbing like it looked like she was melting, kind of crying. And I was just stuck. I didn't know what to say. She just kept saying, "Mom, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry." And I was like sitting there thinking, I hope somebody knows what to say to this, right? And Erica just comes back and just very eloquently says, "So it sounds like you're feeling remorseful." I was like, remorseful. I even know that word, right? And it just did not come to me at the time. And I gave her that feedback, and she had not, it came to her so quickly she hadn't realized how significant that was to me as a new mediator, to hear that word in that context. And so it was a significant, an important plus for her, because she was like, "Oh yeah, that did hit her pretty importantly," but she was so caught up in the moment that she didn't realize that her capturing that feeling made such an important shift in the conversation. So we are learning both from our pluses as well as our deltas. Okay. I'm gonna stop right here and look at the chat. I'm not really good at monologuing. I'm more of a dialoguer. So let's see. Hello, is it Nushin? Nice, thank you for joining us.
Yes, this is Nushin.
Say that one more time.
Nushin.
Nushin, nice to meet you. Thank you. Jermaine, I appreciate that it's included and consistent part of every mediation. Yeah, I think that's very important. Like after every session, I think there should be feedback. Is it really possible to stay neutral as a mediator? Oh, that's a great question. So for us to be, for our core being to be neutral, no, and that's not what we're looking for, right? We're not looking to be neutral. We are giving a neutral process. So don't think of neutral as a noun, but neutral as a verb. We're doing neutrality, right? So yes, I keep having feelings, opinions, judgments about what's going on at the table, and those things are not invited to the table. They are not allowed to hit the mediation table, right? So I have this, so like mediator Tracee gets to sit at the front of the table, right? Grandmother, auntie, political activist, Tracee. She's got a chair on the other side of the room, and I'll revisit her after the mediation is over, right? And so all that conversation that's going on in our head and our analysis about what's going on, the question that I'm asking myself before I'm about to speak to the participant is that me or is that them? If that's me, if that's my opinion, that's my assessment, that's my judgment, it's not allowed to come out my mouth during the mediation. All right. If it's them, then I'm using that to support collaboration. So am I going to be neutral? No. Am I going to give neutrality? Yes, consistently. Back to the chat. What is the inclusive mediation model? What is the inclusive mediation model? So at Community Mediation Maryland, the inclusive mediation model is we centralize on giving reflections by breaking down participants' position about the conflict. We break it down into three things: their feelings about what's going on, their values, their personal values and what's important to them about what's going on, and the specific topics that they would have, right? And giving reflections based off of those things, and supporting that with open-ended questions to open dialogue. And we have a 5-step process to do that with. Okay. Thank you, Kathy, for that question. Michael, could you tell us more about the evaluation process? Is there a checklist? How are the evaluators trained? How are the mediators scored? Is it possible to share the system with us? Sure, I can share that with you. It is tedious. Let me say this. It is about 11 legal size. The matrix that we use is 11 legal size at like 10-point font. And there are close to 200 things that we are looking at as evaluators. The first round of evaluators, we watched several videos together, we scored together, and we made sure from the range of scoring between us was no more than 5 points. On a scale, we had it's a total of 99 points. So there could be no more than 5 points between all of us out of the total. People always try to get me as an evaluator because I have been noted as being the softer mediator, but I'm like, there's not that much flexibility between all of us. So yeah. And current evaluators in the process also score based on past evaluations, and they have to, they observe several times us evaluating, see our evaluation process. Then they do a test evaluation, and again, they have to score within that range themselves. I'm sorry, and part of my job as a mentor for people who are interested in going through PBE, they have an opportunity to mentor with me to prepare it. And we score, and like I said, we have a matrix that has like over close to 200 items on it. Carolyn did the PBE process. She lived to see it, and she lived through it. And yeah, I can. Sally, should I send you the matrix that we have, or you're muted, Sally?
Yes, she's saying yes. You can send it. You can send it to either
good.
of us, and yeah.
Okay, great. All right. Carolyn, do you have like 12 copies of it yourself already?
Probably some. I'm sure I have it somewhere. Yeah, it's
okay.
And also to become an evaluator, it was, if I remember, it was like a 2-year process too. It wasn't just like being able to sit in and do that.
I mean, it would depend on how much time somebody had to dedicate to it. Well, I guess it felt like it took 2 years because we only do the evaluations quarterly.
Mm-hmm.
But we do them a little more frequently now. So
oh, nice.
it might not take somebody as long as 2 years to do it. Is it nice? I don't know. Evaluating it isn't the favorite part of my job. I like helping people prepare for PBE, but being an watching, it's like, yeah, I'd rather mediate than watch mediations, frankly. Yeah. Let's see. Next question. Was there another question? No, that was it. And I think that when I work with folks in preparation for PVE, I try to get them to think more about the feedback than the score. That, you know, the score is not as important to me as you being able to, like, it's rare that in anybody's field that you're going to have somebody pay that much attention to you and invest that much time in giving you such thorough feedback. So, you know, make sure you come open and ready to receive it. And even mediators I've seen mediators who have scored at the highest levels will say that they felt like their learning really began afterwards because of all the feedback that they received. It really just took their practice to the next level. I like the way you talked about feedback is honest, direct, and respectful. Oh, thank you, Sally. Yeah, that's in our manual. It says so we have 5 steps in our mediation process. The 5th one being agreement writing, and step 6 is feedback. So it's part of the mediation process for us, and it's described as, you know, step 6 is in our manual says give honest and respectful feedback. Are there elements of performance that are common deltas? I think, you know, like when I teach inclusive listening, I encourage people to think about it as if they are learning a new language. So, and you know, I'm silly, so I call the new language Mediates, right? And the vocabulary words are familiar to folks. They're, you know, they're whatever the tongue that you're mediating in. For me, it's always English. But the syntax is different, right? So it's like English words with a Prussian syntax or a Tagalog syntax. And so people often feel awkward and uncomfortable with it. And fortunately, we have mediation in terms of volunteers. I feel like tends to attract some of the best and brightest in their communities. Like community mediation centers tend to have, in terms of volunteers, I think regularly attract highly intelligent people who have been very comfortable with, you know, wielding the English language proficiently. And then here comes Tracee Ford or Erica Bridgeford, and we're like, do it this whole other way. And folks, you know, and I tell folks, give yourself at least 2 years, you know, if you mediate regularly, give yourself at least 2 years to be fluent in it. And so, you know, whenever I see people in, you know, doing evaluation or a common delta, has something to do with their fluency in speaking Mediates, you know. And then the exercise of neutrality is difficult. You know, the exercise of neutrality is difficult. And I think in some cases more than others, and for some people more than others, you know. If you are vested in this idea that you know what people need to be doing, it's going to be hard to stay neutral. It's going to be hard to keep your opinions off the table. It's going to be hard not to tell people what to do. But if you know, like I do, I struggle to run my own life. I'm not going to give people advice on how to do theirs. Then it's a little easier. So yeah, neutrality and the, you know, and using the language in this different way, I think are the most common deltas that I run across. Also the idea, oh, thank you, Sally. Sally likes the idea of participants doing the heavy lifting. Yeah, it's hard. I am frequent, I'm like the president of the Hair Club for Men. I'm not only the staff person for it, but I'm a client. I often use mediation in my life. And so I know firsthand it's hard. What specifically do the feedbacks focus on? Questions, management of difference of opinions, ability to manage difficult reactions, or perhaps managing disagreements. Okay, so thank you, Carolyn Christopher. So how I start feedback is I ask, when I'm co-mediating, I ask my do you want to do feedback first, or you want me to do feedback first, right? Whoever is starting, the person that you're giving feedback to first is yourself, and you're starting with your pluses. So I will give myself my pluses, and so let's say for this panel discussion, I would say my pluses for this is, I'm working with the system. I'm moving between hotels right now, and I found accommodations. I'm working with the phone. I'm keeping my phone charged as best I can, and I'm working with the system. That would be one of my pluses. And then my co-mediator would give me my pluses. Okay, can y'all hear me now? Okay, sorry about that. Just when I say I've been rolling with the punches, technology gives me an opportunity to demonstrate that. And so my co-mediator, so I give myself my pluses first. Then my co-mediator gives me my pluses. Like, I really appreciate your content. Thank you for, highlighting how much work the participants are doing. So they give me my pluses. Then I come back and I give myself my deltas. So notice if I'm going first, all the feedback is going to me, pluses or deltas, and I'm leading that conversation. So, some of my deltas would be, maybe you should have called ahead and see if that restaurant would let you sit in and be on Zoom from that restaurant, as opposed to just assuming and showing up without having made a call. And then my co-mediator gives me my deltas. And, and maybe their delta for me is something like you probably could have played around with backgrounds a little bit. So, you didn't give people an involuntary tour of Baltimore while you're on the Zoom, okay? So once they've given me my deltas, then we're going to switch, and they're going to get their feedback, and starting with them giving themselves their pluses. So that's our format for giving the pluses and deltas. There was a lot of questions in there. So, and the things we're focusing on are, what are the things that we did or didn't do that support collaboration? All right, that's what I have my eye on. And that's why I say, I think your conversation about feedback starts even before the mediation happens. All right, so when I'm preparing with my co-mediator, I'm asking them, I'm setting the tone that feedback is important, that I am going to participate in it, and I'm asking my co-mediator to participate in it by, in the preparation, asking them, what are the things that they're working on that they want feedback from me about, and here are the things that I'm working on and that I want feedback from you about. All right, so so it could be about the quality of our reflections, the open-ended questions that we had. Did we get there in enough time to help set up the space? Was our setup supportive of collaboration? Those are the kinds of things. So it can be like huge things, it can be little things, but we want to make sure we're doing this consistently. Questions, management of differences of opinion, ability to manage difficult reactions, or perhaps managing disagreements. So yeah, if I really want to recommend to mediators, if you are having conflict with mediators, to consider mediating with each other, to have a mediated conversation with each other, to work through those things, and to talk about what you need from each other. And I've also have been willing to, in my position, I've driven across the state. I've driven across the state to support mediators in their conversation with each other about feedback, because for some folks it can be very difficult, particularly if you feel like you have a hard time giving feedback, or you feel like you got a lot of deltas for your co-mediator and you're worried about how they're going to receive it. In that situation, I recommend kind of chunk it, so instead of like going through a list of everything you saw that felt like a delta, chunk it into a family. So I felt like that you oftentimes your reflections were positional and missed highlighting a collaborative opportunity, right? And further a competitive discussion. And so, yeah, and maybe giving one or two examples of that as opposed to listing every example of that. In terms of feedback from the participants, I do encourage, and we use in Maryland mediation, for community mediation, we do have an evaluation form that participants can fill out. And they can talk about their experience in the work, but they're often unable to talk about like what the skills are that mediators do. So I do think participant feedback is important. And it might not give us the support that we want as to grow as mediators. Carolyn Stillwell. I remember that CMM used to have a forum to help mediators identify areas to give feedback at. Do we still have that? Yes, we do have a feedback form that mediators use. And what I think is helpful for that, I think it can help shape the conversation with participants, with mediators at the table. But also I encourage community mediation centers to collect those forms so that when mediators are given ideally mediators are getting like an annual review, to kind of look at that to help measure part of the growth that the mediator has gone through. And I can share that too. What is an example of the language that you mean? Okay, let's see if I can do that with what you said. So how I would capture, Phyllis, what you said, what is an example of the language that you mean? If I break that down into feelings, values, and topics. So feeling curious, looking for clarity about how communication is happening, right? So my reflection for that. So if I understand correctly, sounds like looking for clarity and feeling curious about how we communicate as inclusive mediators. Am I understanding that correctly? So I have a distancing phrase to set the tone that I'm working towards understanding. So if I misunderstand something, please let me know I misunderstand it. I capture the feelings, values, and topics as it's said in a statement. And then I end with a check-in phrase so that if I got it incorrect or misunderstood something, that folks can let me know. Is that clear? Okay. I just want to recognize I usually get about 45 hours to train people on that. So to do it in 30 seconds, I'm a little pleased with myself right now.
So if you have it's focused on those three terms, the feelings, values, and topics. That's the language that you're referring to. Is that
right.
Okay.
Right. All right. I'm trying to get y'all back. Can y'all see? Okay, y'all can see me. All right. Shifting back between the chat and the Zoom. All right. And Michael, do you ask for verbal feedback from the parties who have had the dispute? I do not. They have an opportunity to give feedback anonymously if they like. Thoughts, comments, questions, other thoughts, comments, questions, concerns? Guys, you had some wonderful questions. Did I miss any? I want to make sure I didn't miss any. I think the last thing I'll say, if there's some more questions, is, the other piece of my background, Carolyn can kind of attest to this, that I don't talk about as much, but I feel like it kind of comes through, is I was a cheerleader. I was a cheerleader in school. And so I am an avid cheerleader for feedback. I think that I'm really looking for folks to kind of make it posh and bring it back in vogue again. Because we, as I said, we owe it to our participants. We owe it to our participants to make sure that we are growing as mediators. I once had a mediator who was so far off from mediating. like their strategy was to they did predominantly parenting plans. They would listen to the parents for one session, you know, ask a couple of questions about the child. They would end the session after that and scheduling another session, and they come back with a written agreement. Does anything stand out for anyone about that process?
Sounds awful.
It's awful, right? Like, this agreement was written without any input from the participants.
He was doing
their,
He was doing the heavy lifting.
I mean, except that the people had to live with an agreement that a complete stranger had made for them and their child, you know. That's pretty terrible. And so when I introduced the brainstorm process, he was surprised. He was surprised and shocked. No one had given him that feedback. And in fact, but everybody knew how atrocious his practice was. And so, and that's why they called me in, you know, because they knew I would give the feedback. And my wish would have been that, so when I gave him that feedback, I was one voice. He had mediated with dozens of, pardon me. He mediated with dozens of mediators before me. And so one mediator out of dozens has this feedback. And so it doesn't have the weight behind it. Then if I was, you know, at least the third person that had said this. You know, all he knew was that people didn't mediate with him again. That's all he knew. And his thought was that the center had so much confidence in him that they allowed him to mediate by himself because he was so good. That was his take on it. And he was originally resentful when I had been paired with him because he'd been allowed to mediate solo for so long. So I gave feedback to him about what was happening in his practice. And the heaviest part of my feedback was. Can you all hear me now? Okay, my apologies. So we have a responsibility to the participants. That's our first responsibility. So my heart breaks for all the families that he served in that particular way. My heart breaks for him because it was his intention to give high quality service. And up until that point, he thought he had been. He did not understand how way off practice he was, right? So we owe it to each other. And we owe it to the community of mediators to give that feedback, because there are some people who might have been who thought that was great, you know, that because of his lack of neutrality, it's very likely he said something to someone and one of the participants probably had the experience of being able to say, "I told you so," right? And they felt validated in that process, and that's not neutrality. And so, and in doing so, all other mediators get set up. Like we're in this place in the process where we have a lot of education to do about what mediation is. And our biggest education tool is actual mediation. So most of my participants, I have some people who come back more than once and use the process, but most of my participants, this time at the mediation is their first time at the mediation table. And so they are finding out about mediation as I'm delivering the service. And I believe the same was the case for most of his participants. And that's their opinion of that's their understanding. What he did is now their understanding of what mediation is. And it's going to take a lot of us delivering the process consistently and correctly to really inform and educate people about what real mediation is, so that they can determine where they got a good mediation or a bad mediation. And I want us to get to that place where we have
informed consumers of mediation. That is going to be the most important feedback. Like if I go to the dentist, right, and they try to give me a pap smear, I know there's a problem, right? I know there's a problem because I know what my dentist is supposed to be doing. But participants don't know that if they go to their mediator and they start getting advice, many participants don't know that's not what's supposed to be happening. And we need our mediators informed to that degree. All right.
I had one question that was missed, which is, are you using the model of PPB that you described for small claims cases, court cases?
So our belief is it is a basic mediation. So it is the cases that we use in for the PBE evaluation are cases that would sometimes be referred from a small claim court or something. We don't do a whole lot of money stuff, but usually we have cases. What we're looking for in terms of quality of a role play that we use are cases that have 3 to 4 topics that the participants could work on, and have some sort of twist that would often trigger a mediator's judgment, you know, or challenge their neutrality. So that's generally the kind of stuff that we're doing. So, you know, yeah. Other questions?
Thanks for inviting me. And Carolyn, it's been such a treat seeing you. I don't know how many years it's been.
Yeah,
The kids are like in college now and probably supporting you.
Thank
been a
you so
while.
much. I think you've given us so much to think about. It's really very helpful. And
Okay.
I had been sort of lax in encouraging people to give feedback after mediations, but this will change the way I do that.
Okay. Awesome. Thank you, Sally. Miles, and thank you so much for being on the panel with me.
Yeah, great to see you. We're obviously right here in the same area. I'm sure you know some multi-door people, and I bet we'll have an opportunity to meet in person at some point too.
Definitely. And our office is not far from, our office is in Tacoma Park.
Oh, okay. Yeah, right north.
Yeah.
Sweet.
So, thank you all. This is the last in our series of brown bags for this year. So have a great summer, and hopefully we'll see you around. Maybe
Sally,
in person by next fall.
Looks like we have one more question for Miles in the chat
All right.
from Carolyn Christopher.
Yes. So when it comes to feedback for our mediators, we do have opportunities for them to be peer reviewed, but that's really the only time they're getting that feedback from from another mediator. They also, if an attorney calls and has feedback for us, then we'll share the feedback, in a neutral way back to them, make sure that they use it as a learning experience. But other than that, that's pretty much it. With the co-mediations, they might, if there's ever, someone else in there, they'll get a little response back. But for the most part, it's we rely on our surveys at the end, and we kind of keep an eye on those to see if there's anything we need to have, pressing conversations with about to the mediator.
Anything else? Great.
thank you so much, Sally. And please, please, please enjoy your retirement.
Thank you.
Yes, Sally.
Feel free to call me if you need an alibi.